Welcome. In this example, we're going to be creating a Google Apps Script web app that's going to look through a folder and return back the files that are listed within the folder and create a list of them on the web app page. So we've loaded it in default folder ID there. The folder IDs can be picked up within the Google Drive. So we've got the folder ID there that I'm using and running that within the script. We select the load files, and what this does is this will load the list of files that are contained within the folder. So if these files change, it will automatically change whenever we make a request back to the folder. So this is going to be the Google Apps Script code that's going to be running behind the scenes. That's going to allow us to select the folder, output content into the HTML front-end file, communicate from the front-end by sending the folder ID, and whenever the button is clicked with the front-end code, running the Google script run with success handler, and then showing the files within the folder, so passing the ID value back and then returning that file list array that was created. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Go ahead and open up your Google script editor, and we're going to create a function that's going to output a file, so an index file. So first of all, go into the files area and select add file, selecting an HTML file that we're adding in, and we'll just give it a name of index. So this is how we're going to be referring to it. By default, it creates a basic HTML structured page that's ready to output content, and for now we're just going to say hello within that output page. Within the Google code, so this is going to be running a default function, and this is going to use doGet, which is going to output a web app. And what we want to do is we want to return HTMLService, and we're creating an HTML output from file. So that's coming from the file, and then we need to list out the file source. Make sure that the spelling is the exact same as the file that you just created. If you're using uppercase, create it with uppercase. So this is going to be case sensitive. So now we're ready to output our web app. So we can go to the deploy, select the new deployment, and this is going to create a brand new deployment type. So selecting it as a web app, and I'm going to just call it sample app. We're going to execute it. So this is going to be the email address that's executing the code. And depending on what you want to set as the settings, you can set it for who has access to it. So I'm going to set it to anyone has access to it, and then go ahead and deploy it. Once it's ready and deployed, then you can go ahead and click the web app URL, the output being displayed on the page. We can continue to build out. So once we want to do the testing deployment, we can go under the test deployments. Select the URL here for the testing deployment, and that should output the same result as we have within the script, but the difference here is going to be that as we're making updates to the content, it's going to also update the output area within the display area. So this is good for as we're developing the content. So let's go ahead and we're going to populate some HTML, give this one a title. So this is going to be listing out folder files list. And we can close off that title tag. So now we go back out to the development version. So the development will end in DEV, and we refresh it. And now we've got the title there within the script. We also want to select a folder. So I've got a folder that I've created that's got a bunch of PDFs that are uploaded. So these are the PDFs that I want to display. So it'll display all of the files that I have currently within this particular folder. In order to get the folder ID, we go to folders and then / and copy that. That's going to be the ID of the folder that you're going to be referencing within the code. Go back out to the script editor, and I'm just going to create a global value for ID and then place the ID of the folder that we're going to be using. Going back to the index page, I'm going to populate some more index content. And what I want to do is I want to set up a button that's going to be a clickable button. So this button will trigger the event where we're going to be load files. Now there's a number of ways to do this. If you have just the one ID that you're getting, you could have it load automatically. But in this case, we're going to simulate how it is in order to interact with the HTML part of the web app and then send the function and run a function on the back end. So we need to add in some JavaScript, any other front end code where we're adding in the script tags. and we want to select the element. So this is going to be the button, and we select it by document, query selector, and selecting the element that's a button. We can also be more specific, so we can add in a class, and going to add in a class of button. So selecting the element class of button, and then when button, so add event listener, and the event that we're listening for is a click. Once the button is clicked, we're going to run the event to the backend, but for now we'll just output into the console log so that we can just make sure that things are working properly. So go back to the dev version, and now we should see a button that says load files. If we do a expect on the developer console, we can see that the developer console, that everything is working properly. Let's go back into the code that we're working on, and we're going to run a function to the Google Apps script, and this can be done by Google script run, and then we're going to run with success handler. And what this is going to do, the success handler is going to be when the function runs successfully, it's going to run this on the front end code. So we're going to show files, and the function that we want to run is going to be get files in folder function. So now we're going to be running a function called get files in folder, and we need to create that within the Google Apps script. So go ahead and create that function by the same function name, and then go back to the front end code, and we need to create a function within the front end code called show files. And this is going to be the function that's going to run once everything is properly output. And we're going to list out the files, and so that's going to be coming from the Google Apps script backend code. We want to select and create a list. So let's go ahead and we're going to create another element that we can list out the file contents within. So this can be a div, or actually let's make it an unordered list so that we can just add list items to this file list and close off the unordered list, and go ahead and give it an ID, and this can be file list. So we want to select elements by the, and we can do that here on the global value, where we can select the element, and this will just be the unordered list. And using document and query selector again, we're going to select the element with an ID of file list. So that will select it into the unordered list object, and then we want to add to that. And as we iterate through what's being returned back, create a list item, and this is going to be a document, create element, and this is going to be regular JavaScript code using the DOM, where we're creating an element on the fly. I'll add some spaces there so we can move the code up. And we also want to create a link. So that's also going to be using the document, create element, and the link, the element that we're creating is going to be an anchor tag. So now we're creating each one of those for each item. And for the link, we're going to add in the text context, or text content. And this is going to be whatever the file name is. And we want to iterate through this list. So we're going to be selecting the files and using the for each method and listing through each one of the files. And we're going to move these code into each one of those items as a file. So we can grab the file name for each item, for each file. And we can also take the file list and we can move it into the show files, or we can select the unordered list. And then within the unordered list, we want to clear out the HTML each time. So we're going to just do a HTML and set that to be blank. So every time the button is clicked, it won't continuously add list items. It'll clear out the unordered list. So let's continue to build out those links. And for the link, the href is going to be the file URL. So we're getting some information within the file object link, and the target for the link is going to be blank. So it's going to be underscore blank. So it goes to a new page for the link object. And for the list item, we're going to append child, and the child that we're appending is going to be a link. And within the list itself, we're going to append child, and the child that we're appending is going to be the list item itself. This is going to be unordered list. Let's save that. So this code is going to run through what's being returned back from the Google Apps script and then add it into the front end code. So let's finish off the Google Apps script where we've got the files in folder. We want to select the folder object, and using the drive app service, we're getting the folder by ID, and we've got the ID there as a global value. And then you can also change the ID to look through different folders. We're going to do that afterwards as well. So we're going to grabbing the files, so folder, and we want to get all of the files that are contained within the folder. Create an array for the file list so that we can add to that file list from the array, and then loop through. So this is an iterative object. So while it has next, while this is true, it's going to iterate to the next item until it runs out of files within the list. And we create a file object next, and that's going to return back the next file in the list. And then taking the file list array, we're going to add to that file list array, and using the name, and this is going to be an object that we're adding. So file get name. So this is all contained within the file object. And I need to have the other curly bracket there, so it is an object. So file get name, and then the URL is going to be under file get URL. So this is going to return back the requested parameters. It's going to loop through there, and then it's going to return back the file list array that we can then use on the front end code. So I think we're ready, and let's try out the code. So refresh the developer page, and we need to access and authorize it. So let's run the code so we can review the permissions and accept permissions. You always need to accept the permissions whenever you're adding any type of new permissions for your script to run. And now let's refresh the page. We've got our button that goes load files, and let's see what happens. So that lists out all of the files that we have within the Google folder, and now we can click them, and that's going to open up the file that we have contained within the folder. So let's make a few more changes to make this code a little bit more flexible, where we can pass in the folder ID value, and this is going to be useful in case you want to search for different folders. And if you want to keep it just as the same folder, you can keep the script as is. So instead of just having the button, we're going to have an input field. So this is going to be type and text, and this is just going to contain the folder ID. And right now for the value, we'll set the value to be what we had as this ID. And of course you can have it, you would be adding in whatever value that is appropriate for your code. Within the JavaScript, we want to get the ID. I'll call it IDF, and this is going to be selecting from folder ID, whatever the value that we have there, and it's going to be passing that value into here. So what we want to do is we want to pass in the folder ID value into there. So let's select that, and we'll do IDF value is going to be what we're going to have for the ID value. So you can have a separate value that's going to be getting the IDF value from the object, or you could just put it directly within that statement, get folder files. So now we can refresh it, and we should have an input field. And let's go back to the Google Apps Script code, and we need to now take in that parameter. So it's going to be also a good example of how we can take in the parameter. So folder ID, and now this will dynamically change, and it will look for a different folder ID. So again, let's refresh, clear out the console, load files, and so now it's a little bit more dynamic. So if we had a separate folder that we want to list out the files, we can just add the ID there. So it looks like we're ready to do a final deployment. So let's go into the new deployment, and that's going to output the executable as a working web app.